Welcome to Young Gun, a podcast about Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. I am Demetri Ravanos, a Bama grad. She is Lauren Brownlow, the biggest Panthers fan I know. And we have been looking at this team with a spotlight on its new franchise quarterback. And that part of this podcast is not changing. It is still going to be about the Panthers. Obviously, any team, the quarterback is going to be a focus, right? But we have been saying for a couple of weeks now that we thought the show going forward had to be bigger than just Bryce Young, and that was going to be reflected in a change to the name. And basically just the way we approach this show. And Lauren Brownlow, I think we have settled on what we are doing now.
Okay.
And it is,
I agree.
It is inspired by every conversation I have had with you on these cameras and microphones, but also inspired by the idea that we would like businesses to want to do business with us, because you had suggested we're at one point, which, you know.
I mean, the most accurate summation.
Agreed.
But a little crass.
Right.
Admittedly.
So we toned it down a little bit, but still reflected the overall attitude we have had watching the Panthers for the last few years.
Even when they're good, by the way, I feel this way about them.
I would agree. The name of the show going forward is This Team is Killing Us, a podcast about what the Carolina Panthers do to good people.
I love that.
Which
I mean, I never said I was a good person, but this is what they do to people.
I think
everyone's worthy of love, even if you're not a good person.
I think that whether or not you're a good person has to be judged by others. You can't really say it for yourself.
No.
And Lauren Brownlow, I tend to think of you as an above average person.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So more good than bad. Certainly you have your drawbacks, but we all do.
Of course. Yeah.
All right, let's dive into it. This is the first show since the press conference introducing both Dan Morgan as the GM and Dave Canales as the head coach. We'll get into specifics, obviously, as the show goes on, but I do want just your general thoughts. What are some of the different things that jumped out to you at the press conference?
This was one of those times where it was nice to have an old phone, because I just watched the presser on there on the Panthers Twitter live stream.
Mm-hmm.
Which I enjoyed very much, because I could view the running commentary from other people as broken as I am. And that was entertaining.
Yeah.
Especially because, I mean, I you don't want to be like a technical person necessarily, but it was commented on by enough people. Like the audio, I think my favorite was, it sounds like AM radio. I think a ham radio was one comment I saw. At one point we were like they switched to Dan Morgan, and like literally it was inaudible.
Yeah.
At one, like they had to like turn it up, even though it still sounded terrible.
Yeah.
I think they fixed it before they put it like back out, but it was still like, for real. Like this is when everyone's watching us, and you have to embarrass us in public with something that's easily, but that was fine. I mean, and then obviously when Tepper was up there, even though it wasn't for very long, people had a lot to say, including me. I was like, I don't need to see him right now, to be honest with you.
That's one of the things that jumped out to me, is because you'll remember the press conference. Now, granted, he was just introducing a new head coach, not a new GM at the time, but
right.
Tepper did make himself kind of front and center of the Reich press conference, and that wasn't really the case this time around.
No, it wasn't. He wasn't front and center, because that's what was concerning to me too. I'm like, are we doing this again? Like, Are you going to be here the whole time? Are you taking questions, sir? Now, honestly, like if he'd been taking questions, I would have been more intrigued to see it. But of course, he's not going to.
Would you have? Like, I'll get into this a little bit more later. It surely does not seem like he was going to get any tough questions from the people that were asking questions.
I think he's the only one who would have, to be honest.
Interesting.
Because here's the thing. We don't really know what those guys are going to do yet. So like we can't, and what has Dan Morgan done wrong?
Yeah.
As of now, like, what are you going to grill him about?
I mean, I think it is fair to ask Dan Morgan, or I guess probably also, you're right. This would be more for Dave
being
Tepper.
In a room with Dan Morgan and looking into those eyes and then telling me you're going to ask him a tough question.
I mean, geez, just look at someone with that neck size. Are you really going to challenge that, man? Yeah. The thing, I would say this, Dan Morgan, actually, I thought came across as somebody that recognized
yes, he does.
What is wrong. Not he knows all the specific problems, but from a GM standpoint, like he gets that there is a level of apathy around the Carolinas right now.
Well, he said they don't scare anybody.
Yeah.
And he's right.
Well, it's not only they don't scare anybody, like he talked about the fact that the Panthers are probably not the first thing that families in Charlotte think about doing on a Sunday anymore. Like, that's a very sobering thing to say or to hear from your GM in his first press conference. I do think it would be fair to ask, and you're right, this is probably more of a question of Tepper than Dan Morgan, but given everything that went wrong last year, the last 2 years of decision-making around the personnel and the roster, why on earth do you try and sell somebody that was on those staffs as the new GM? I think that's a fair question. I think that's something, though, that Tepper has to answer, not Morgan.
Right. And I don't disagree with that. I think if you're going to pick anyone to do it with, it has to be someone like Dan, who, at least he has a significant amount of experience elsewhere in a good way. And there are people around the league, not just in Carolina, that respect his ability to, be in charge of personnel. So and also he's a guy that plenty of people around here love. And so at least that shows that they get it from that perspective, at least a little bit. Right.
Yeah.
Do I have some reservations? Yeah. But at the same time, what top tier personnel guy right now would want to come work with David Tepper?
No, I think that's fair. And I also think that, one thing that jumped out to me about Dan was his answers were a lot of platitudes, but at the same time, what really can he say right now? The league year's not even over for him to say, oh, we definitely want, T. Higgins if he hits the market.
I mean, I liked what he had to say about the mentality of guys that they want, because he's not wrong about that. They don't have enough guys like a Frankie Louvu, who it was wonderful. And if you want to build your culture around a guy, it's a guy like that.
Do you mean dogs? Because I heard him say that about half a dozen times.
This has become popular again recently, I feel like, because I see all the chest x-rays on Twitter with a Rottweiler inside or what. And I'm like, I mean, it's fine, but I don't know. Dogs can also be very friendly.
Agreed.
Not at all. I know what you mean by
Rottweilers and pit bulls could be very friendly.
Of course. I know what you mean when you say it got that dog in you or whatever. I get it. I understand the lingo. I'm a little tired of
that dog in you should. No offense to you, because I know you had one. That dog in you should be a Chihuahua, because I've only ever met dicks that are Chihuahuas.
That's true. To be fair, I feel like they're mostly acting in self-defense.
No, I think that's fair.
If you were as tiny as a Chihuahua, you'd probably be terrified of anything that moved near you too. You'd be like, get away from me. Don't step on me. I am very small.
And they tend to end up very old.
They do, yeah. But they also, they're very neurotic. I thought they were cute for a while, and I realized I can't. I'm too neurotic on my own to have a dog that's this neurotic. No.
So one thing that I do kind of wish somebody would have asked, and granted, maybe Morgan couldn't answer this question right now, but you and I have talked about this, is the idea that this team, especially on offense, needs to be rebuilt in a lot of ways. But the biggest need right now is the offensive line. We don't have a first-round pick. That's not something you can really go out and count on finding quality anchors of your offensive line in the free agent market.
I'm slightly concerned when he's like, who knows what we do? Maybe we try to get back in. Maybe we trade down. And I go, trade down? No.
Are you going? You would have to find somebody.
Trade back? You better be getting somebody great.
Well, not only that, I also had this thought, because I had the same thought when he said that.
That was my moment of terror. My heart.
My concern was, I know he has worked at a lot of front offices. He has not been a GM. Does he think there is a scenario where someone will trade him a 1 next year for a 2 this year?
No, I don't think he thinks that. Again, that's the thing. Dan, I know it's easy to look at Dan. Not that you're doing this. This is just a general critique. Look at Dan, see a former player, and see a guy that, let's face it, was an absolute freaking animal on the football field, not a rational person. And just go, how's this guy gonna, they're just hiring him because he played here and people like him. I just think it does at least some of what he's done in the past a bit of a disservice.
Well, I think that it is significant that they introduce who his vice president of football operations is going to be, because one of the things I think Dan did,
they brought in the guy from the Chiefs, which I liked a lot.
One of the things I think Dan did really well is laying out what his front office story was. The fact that it was recognized that he can recognize talent explains to you why he's there. Obviously, the Panthers need that, but given where we are financially right now, and obviously the salary cap is going to keep changing every year, you need somebody that is really adept at managing the numbers. And it feels like they found the balance to the eye for talent that Dan is going to be, counted on to be.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And look, that I would be quick to jump to pessimism in almost any scenario. I just I have always maybe I'm biased because that was the first team that I really, really fell for.
Sure.
That I really fell deeply in love with the players.
That Cardiac Cats team.
Yes. 100%. I liked the team before. I enjoyed the win over the Cowboys because who doesn't in the
Sure.
playoffs? I mean, really, who hasn't beaten the Cowboys in
Right.
the playoffs at this point? Just kidding.
It's a rite of passage.
Well, actually, I'm not kidding. But regardless, yes, it is. Like, so maybe I'm a little biased because I did really love that group and like everyone that was a part of it,
Yeah.
and Dan included. But like, I just think, why not? I mean, we've tried all kinds of other
Sure.
things, you know? And then I can't help but think also, like, Tepper is obviously still front and center here. And the one line of questioning that I don't feel like was addressed adequately, or at least in a way I liked, was about that for me, about like the like when I heard they're going to talk every day, I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Do most owners talk to their personnel people / coach every day?
I mean,
probably not.
You know, Mike Florio had that report, and we've talked before. We believe his source on this was Frank Reich. So, you know, take that what you will. But, you know, Mike Florio had that report that weekly Reich was getting report cards from Dave Tepper about what went right and what went wrong, not just during the game, but during the week. Like,
supposedly he was showing him Twitter, like, play breakdowns.
Yeah. There is a real, I think, process to what it means to work with Dave Tepper that maybe is going to end up being an advantage. Maybe Dan Morgan seeing what the low end of this is.
The thing is, you know what? I don't think we should discount too. You know how it is when you have a boss that you have to navigate around a little bit. I talked about this when I was on the OG with the Joes. Like, maybe Dan knows how to finesse Tepper a little bit too.
It is one of those things. I have
make him think it was his idea.
Well, yeah, I have told you this before, so I'm not I'm not revealing anything to you on microphone that I have not told you already. I'm telling you this for the benefit of the audience.
Okay.
All right. When we were working together at the Buzz,
yes,
there were things that I would make sure our boss told me. Because you were so new at radio, I did not want him getting in your head, right? And I would decide if Lauren needed that information, right? Whether that is fair or not.
That's fine.
If
I was
Morgan,
also pregnant, so like,
right,
you probably didn't want to stress me out any more than you needed to.
I mean, I bring that up because I think Dan Morgan just watched what can happen to a coach when there is no governor on Dave Tepper.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, if you are savvy enough to recognize when the way your boss does business is going to hurt, particularly a first-time head coach.
Yeah.
Good.
We all develop workarounds, I feel like, around, even in the real world, around people at our office that make it more difficult for us to do our jobs. And we figure out a way to like, oh, can we go around this person?
Right.
Can we make it so they don't find out that we're doing this? Can we make them think it was their idea? That's always a big one.
Yeah.
I think in almost any facet of life, when you have someone who like wants to take credit for everything and feel like they're involved, you have to make them feel like it was their idea.
100%. I mean, I told Lauren when we started working together that if we do anything that is not in line with what our boss wanted us to do, I don't mind being the one to go to the principal's office and answer for it.
Yes.
I think
I always appreciated about you.
I think Dan Morgan,
he's probably similar.
Yeah, is similar, but B also knows the principal is not going to yell at a dude that looks like Dan Morgan the way he would a dude that looks like Scott Fitterer.
Exactly. And also the principal, I think, kind of loves him.
Yeah, agreed.
So like that helps. If he likes you and he's not going to yell at you because he's not an idiot.
Yeah.
Then like, and you're not intimidated by him, which I don't think Dan is. I do not
I agree.
And that's the thing. I think that's the biggest part. You have to have somebody in that role, both as maybe as coach and as GM, certainly, that is not intimidated by Dave Tepper. And he'll just be like, this is what I think's best. If you don't want to do it, fine. Then you put your name on it. That's what I would tell him.
Yeah.
You put your name on this move, then you make sure all the fans know that you did this.
Yeah, 100%.
Whatever it is. Like, I'm not wearing a move that he wants to make just because he pays me.
Yeah,
I'm not.
I found it interesting that the press corps only sort of hinted and did not outright ask the thing that we talked about a lot, the thing that I think any show, not just that covers the Panthers, that covers the NFL, was asking a lot, which is, were you scared off at all by Dave Tepper's ownership of this team? I think it was Dave Newton from ESPN that asked Dave Canales if he looked at firing 3 coaches over the last 5 years.
Yeah, he did. He asked him that.
Was that Newton? I just want to give the proper credit.
Someone did. I don't know. Whatever.
That was sort of the only, I thought we might, given the way everybody talked so openly about what the problems are right now with the culture of the Panthers, I thought we would see that press corps be a little more bold in the room.
I mean, yeah.
And I'm not, by the way, I'm not pointing fingers and saying anyone
Yeah.
individually did not do their job. I'm just surprised collectively that there was a lot of.
I think some of the way that Canales answered that question is most likely why.
Yeah.
Because not saying that like everybody just took what he said and was like, that's it.
Mhm.
I think it's more because people were like, okay, so it's clear that this is the way he's going to frame this, regardless of whether or not it's true. So like, even if we ask about this, he's going to say like, oh no, because I looked at Bryce and thought X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Like, I mean, probably, but yeah, could someone have asked a follow up about that? Probably, but he kind of like made it an easier follow up to talk about Bryce because there's a bunch of things you kind of have to hit, and then all of a sudden it becomes Bryce. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Canales and Bryce here in just a second. First, though, I do want to ask everybody listening. Look, we've got a brand new name now. Again, it is called "This Team Is Killing Us." I need you, and Lauren needs you, to go to whatever platform it is you are enjoying this show on and leave a rating and a review. If you are not already subscribed, please do that as well. It helps more people find the show, and when you go through sort of a rebrand, you really need that stuff. So please take the time to let people know that you enjoy this show so that it gets in front of more people. Lauren, it is not lost on me, and I don't think it is lost on you either, that there were times where Dave Canales seemed to be talking directly to Bryce Young in this press conference.
I got the sense more, maybe a little bit, but I definitely got the sense that he was talking to people who were saying that Bryce was a deterrent to taking this job.
Yeah,
100%.
So these are a couple of things that I jotted down that seemed to me like these are messages to Bryce, and I know that he and Bryce have already spoken. Like he made that clear. I think that is probably the first call you make when you are in that last stage of the interview process, is to make sure you and the quarterback.
Wait, are you sure? You mean you're supposed to be on board with who the quarterback is as the head coach? Huh?
Yeah, it's crazy you say that, Lard, because these are the things that I wrote down that Canales said. 1, we're going to become what he is great at. 2, you have to understand your quarterback's growth curve. They are not all the same.
Yeah.
And 3, he seems to have deep thoughts. Dave Canales does seem to have deep thoughts about what it means to be playing the quarterback position when you are in Bryce's size range. I mean, did you hear him say the thing about even at 6'1", you're probably not seeing over
that was
an offensive lineman?
Yeah, I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense, but I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I think that these are all things that Dave Canales probably has told Bryce in private, but it is important in Dave Canales' mind that Bryce see in public. He is saying, I'm going to do all the things that clearly Frank Reich was never going to do.
Right. No, I mean, you mean call plays for the quarterback that he has? Yeah,
exactly.
That would be wild to see. It's probably going to look a lot different. When a play caller's in there that doesn't actively hate him.
Yeah,
that would be great.
I don't believe that. I think he's playing to Bryce's ego a little bit when he talked about looking at when he was the quarterbacks coach of the Seahawks, and they are looking at the top of the draft in terms of quarterbacks that year. And
we weren't picking that high. Nice flex, buddy. We get it. You're good at football.
I was about to say
you're on teams that don't pick high in the draft. Must be nice.
I was about to say, but the year before they were picking at number 7, right? Like it's not like they were never that high in the draft.
I know.
But that line he had about, I looked at the guys at the top of the draft and Bryce was clearly number 1. Like, I don't even think those of us that settled on Bryce should be number 1 ever thought clearly he is number 1.
No, I never thought that.
Yeah, I think that's bananas. I do think there was some pointed things in there, though. Particularly what stood out to me is him being so specific about getting the ball out in 2.7 seconds or less. Like, that is a message.
We've seen that in the playoffs, too. Yeah. Like, they've clocked it. And, like, that is, you do have to. Whether it's throwing away or whatever, it's got to go somewhere.
Right.
And, yes, the receivers don't always get open. And we talked about that more at the beginning of the year, I feel like, than at the end, where we felt like he needed to throw it away a tick sooner or run or do something.
Yeah,
like,
I think on our first...
Yeah.
I think on our first show, I told you that in Alabama it was a problem that he would hang on. And by the time he started running, that window was gone. I mean, I think that's what it is, right? Like he's
got to get the clock sped up.
Yeah. He's not giving Bryce like theoreticals. He is telling Bryce like by this time, it's either out of your hand or you're running.
Exactly. And I think that's good for him. I mean, look, we talked about this too, but he has had results working with, the height challenged quarterback.
No, and I think that's a plus.
And the quarterbacks that frankly have had rough years and needed some guidance and some confidence and a pick me up. And so in that way, like I told you too, like I am encouraged, and I feel like if he works with this guy for a couple years and still can't get it together, well, they tried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His quarterback last year, the season before, Baker Mayfield was dropped by the Panthers. He was signed by the Rams, and the Rams had no intention of keeping him. And yesterday, he was the MVP of the Pro Bowl. Like, that is a pretty good. Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, you're right.
I mean, it's a pretty good testament to what Dave Canales can do with quarterbacks. And obviously, Canales, now his purview, his responsibility is much larger than just working with the quarterbacks, which is why I think he talked so much about Ejiro Evero in that press conference, or EJ Evero as he called him multiple times. I guess the big question now is, how realistic is it that they hang on to it?
I mean, look, coaches, GMs, owners, they say things all the time that don't end up being true. However, I feel like he sounded pretty sure.
Yeah.
That was the thing that struck me, was I didn't know that was like, I thought it was still kind of up in the air, and I guess it still technically is, but I don't know that you say that if you're Dave Canales, if you're not pretty sure.
The only team that specifically has been linked to Evero as a DC really isn't even a strong link. It is the fact that Seahawks ownership seemed to really like Evero when they interviewed him for the head coaching job, and there is a question of whether or not Mike McDonald is going to be told, this is going to be your DC. I think there's a better than 50% shot he's still in Charlotte next year.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah.
And that would be a huge deal. And honestly, like, look, do we need to go through new coaches if the coaches stink? Yes, but it's always nice. And that's a position that doesn't always get the continuity with the Panthers, frankly, because they're always getting hired when the defense gets good.
Right.
Which they should. They do, like, the Panthers have been very fortunate with defensive coordinators. I feel like over the years, they've had some really good ones. And I think Evero has that kind of trajectory as well. But I didn't think they'd be able. I mean, if I were him, I would run away.
No, agreed. I think there are
but
plenty
he likes
of teams.
The guys.
That's the thing that I think is going to be interesting here. If you like the personnel that you have,
I like them too. There's a few pieces that I think they need, but I like the personnel for the most part. I don't think they need to blow it up on that side.
So how much of the overall team struggle, if we are saying the defense was a pretty sound unit, how much should Dan Morgan and Dave Canales be looking at last year's flaws as at least significantly a product of Frank Reich's system, culture, whatever the case may be? Like, is it?
It's probably a little dangerous.
That's exactly what my question is how dangerous does it become to say the culture was so bad, we're going to be better simply by changing that?
Yeah, because it's not just that. I mean, we said that too. We even said that entering the season. From the beginning of the season, we called the, group of pass catchers and running backs that they brought in as like some sort of, boon to Bryce Young as like a fantasy bench, because it is.
Yeah.
It was like the Thielen, Hayden Hurst, who was, had injury issues throughout the year anyway, but wasn't that great when he wasn't hurt. And
wasn't that active when he wasn't
Chark
hurt.
Was up and down. He had some nice moments, but spent a lot of the year not being as good. If he can click it together, which you have to hope so, because he was the one guy that I thought was like the biggest overall disappointment. Miles Sanders was hurt, so I'm giving him some slack personally, and I feel a little bad about my sad Sanders run now that I know that he was hurt, and now that I also know that Frank Reich hated calling offensive plays for this football team.
Right.
I feel a little badly for him in that way, so I'd like to apologize. I mean, not that he listens, but
looking back on the season, how do you feel about Jonathan Mingo? Like, I will own, I had very high hopes for him.
I had high hopes for him too.
I thought there were times that flashed what could be, but never, literally never when they needed him to come through.
Never. And you know what? I think part of it, and Panthers fans who are old enough will understand. It's Dwayne Jarrett trauma. It's like it's all of these receivers that come in and you're like, oh, they should be great. They were great in college, and they come in and they just suck here. They just suck, and he might just suck here. Like that just may be what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really disappointing because he is the guy I think most capable of being that breakaway receiver. That guy that can, you can count on for real separation. They're gonna have to find that either in this draft or
maybe
in a
they
free
can
agent
give him
class.
a hand transplant. Oh, sorry. I'm just saying, like, if they could put somewhat like Thielen's hands on him, that'd be great.
Yeah,
but they can't do that, and so
let's wrap up sort of back where we began with Dave Tepper and how inactive he was in this press conference.
It wasn't inactive enough. As I sent you some screen grabs from the people who were not happy to see his face at that press conference.
Yeah, we'll put a few of those up on the screen as I ask you this question. Do you believe that he is capable of being more hands-off than he has been?
Oh, that's
because remember, the question is not will he? The question is he even capable?
I think if someone is able to convince him, because I do think the one thing he likes less than not be getting all the credit for the nice things happening is nice things not happening at all.
Right.
And so, like, if he can be convinced that, hey, look, like, even if, like, for a year, he's like, oh, let me step out a little bit and just, like, let y'all do your thing, and they have some success and start to turn, like, they can point to that and say, see, you said you'd step back a little bit, and we really started to thrive. Your selflessness, again, is how you massage the ego. Your selflessness is what led us here. I just think people should know that.
This city
you really
will remember
learned.
Your sacrifice.
You learned from your mistake. Like, that's what I would be telling him if I were in charge of his PR. Thank God I'm not. You want to talk about taking years off my life?
You would be fired very quickly.
I would quit. I would be like, are you kidding me? No.
So here is the thing that I think is going to be very interesting. You and I have talked about in the past that there is, I think, a belief in Dave Tepper that he may not be a football guy, but that doesn't mean that anyone else knows better than him, or at least anyone in the building knows better than him what to do right now. I think now that his GM, the guy he's going to be seeing every day, is a football guy.
No offense to those people. However, if you're bringing like your coach plays from Twitter,
agreed.
I don't know that you do know better than everyone in that building. I really don't. Sorry.
Look, from the outside, it's very easy to look at Dave Tepper and go, no, he absolutely does not know better.
Yes, obviously, like, he's worked in football a long time. I'm sure there's plenty of things he actually does know about running a football team.
I don't think he does.
I don't know.
I think it's very
different. Seen any evidence.
I think it's very different being a minority owner and actually working in football.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think you can tell just by the way he behaves in public that he is definitely one of those guys that thinks his bank account reflects how intelligent he is.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's lots of those guys out there.
He has the answers at least. And so I think,
sadly, we here in America now know better.
Yeah. Well, but we're not done learning our lesson, Lauren.
No, we're not. We're definitely not.
I think now that his GM is a guy that is definitively a football guy, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for Dave Tepper to convince himself that he's the one with the right answer.
I think that's right? Like, when you look at a guy like Scott Fitterer, you're not going to like, but Dan
I'm just
Morgan.
Look at the way Scott Fitterer behaved in the drink throwing video. It's very clear that Fitterer was there to fill a seat more than he was to do a job.
Right, exactly. And so, like, to be honest, I feel like I don't even know what Scott Fitterer could or couldn't do, because I feel like we never really got to see that. But Dan Morgan is not going to, in my opinion, Dan is not going to sit at that job and have his credibility take hits. Yeah. He's worked too hard for this business for too long just to let some idiot tell him what football moves to make. I personally, like, I get why people are concerned about Tepper. I'm not saying they're wrong to be. They should be. I am too. However, I really don't think that Dan Morgan is just going to sit there and do whatever football moves David Tepper says to do just because he wants to keep his job. Like, Dan could get another job.
Right. I mean, both of those guys, Morgan and Canales, both went out of their way to mention what they learned from the front office in Seattle. Like, there was a real air of bringing expertise to Carolina that has not been here before,
and
or at least has not been here in a long time.
For sure. And one thing I liked, it's not as like technical personnel related, a lot that Canales said. Because obviously he's spoken some platitudes. Coaches do that all the
Yeah.
time. Like, it is what it is. But I liked that he said, like, culture is not just what you celebrate, it's also what you condemn.
Right.
And I liked the way he talked about talking to the players. We've already discussed this a little bit, but like, he's like, I'm not going to like shame you and scream at you and treat you like a child, but I'm also going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to love and be supportive. And like, that's what I think we agree that like the modern NFL player needs.
Yeah,
is a
100%.
coach like that. You want him to be honest.
Yep.
Don't like blow smoke up their asses because they're too smart for that. But also, like, you don't have to like scream at them and make them like feel like children because they're 1 minute early to a meeting instead of 5.
I got into this exchange because one of the recent college football bubble baths I did was about DJ Durkin getting hired to be Auburn's defensive coordinator. DJ Durkin, former head coach at Maryland.
Auburn building the Death Star of football.
100%.
Really, just admirable work there.
He was the head coach during a time when there was a culture in place that resulted in the death of a player. Whether or not you could say he killed the kid is up for debate, but his culture was what resulted in the death, right? And I had someone on Twitter respond saying that, well, I don't understand why we say this is a toxic culture. This is the way my coach in high school coached us. And I would point this out, not only about Durkin, but what you said about the way you coach the modern NFL player. Maybe there's a reason your high school coach couldn't get a job beyond high school.
Maybe there's a reason. And Bill Belichick wasn't even as much this guy.
No.
But there's a reason he's not working. You know? I mean, a little bit. There's a reason guys like Tom Coughlin like fell out of style.
Yep.
Because no one wants to be screamed at anymore. There's a reason Urban Meyer got immediately exposed when he was fired from the Jags. Like, there was a reason like all these exposés kept going because no one wants to be talked to like that.
That's the thing, right? And there is, I think that Nick Saban needed the failure in Miami to be what he was in Alabama, because even though he did have that championship at LSU, because you had to learn that just because it worked on you does not mean it is going to work forever. It is not about one generation being weaker than the other. It is 100% about things change. It's
Sometimes
not worse. It's not better.
Yeah.
It's different. And you have to accept that.
I think a lot of people would really benefit from knowing that, you know, sometimes you come out better from something in spite of something happening and not because of it. Really.
Right.
Or if it's because of it, it's because you had to face something bad happening to you and navigate through it and like get tougher as a result of that. But could have been literally anything. It doesn't mean that like your parents, your dad not saying I love you until you were like in your 50s or something. That doesn't mean that's a good thing.
Right.
Just because you grew up that way, you know, and I don't know, whatever time that happened. I've been watching World War II shows, and that's the thing where like the dad won't say I love you, but he looks at him lovingly, and you're just like, oh yeah, that was the thing. That was the thing. Like, you couldn't say I love you.
Yeah.
To your.
Should I be watching that World War II show, Masters of Air?
I'm enjoying it, although the accent work is
That's what have you watched the new season of Fargo?
Not yet.
Okay, Sally and I started watching it, and
just a lot.
Sally is all the way in, and I find the story enjoyable. However,
it can be distracting. If
Juno
it's bad.
Temple, who is Keely in Ted Lasso,
Oh no.
with that accent,
Oh no.
I can't even follow the story because I'm so hung up on the goofy Minnesota accent.
There's a movie like that I saw. I think it was Prometheus. Or it was Prometheus and Avatar as well. The first one, a little bit. If your character does not necessitate a Southern accent, please don't have them try, especially the Brits. No offense. Like, y'all do American accents great.
Yeah.
Surprisingly well.
Yeah.
Like, please don't have them do Southern accents. They can't do it.
Or
Americans for that matter. Someone from New York. They can't really do it either, but the Brits really can't do it. And it's painful to listen to.
Yeah.
It hurts me.
Agreed. If you can do a Southern accent, have someone that is from the South tell you what that accent is, and don't just play your character.
Don't just play a World
City.
War II movie or whatever. Just some movie where like the Southern dude in it is like, oh, we'll just copy his accent. No, they probably are wrong too.
Yeah.
So don't do that. Like,
when I moved up here from Alabama, like
it's a different accent.
1,000%
People don't
a different
understand
accent.
that. Yeah.
Like, y'all's is so much lighter, and ours is way gruffer and more bassy. And so when I first got here, every dude I talked to, I thought
it's even different geographic. Right. Well, I get that.
and now that I've been here for 18 years, like,
Do
I
they
totally
call that
get
a y'all sexual?
Yeah, probably.
I saw the other day. Yeah, a y'all sexual.
I
Sure.
like that.
Well, it's a thing
Yeah.
in the South for sure. But like it's different even geographically here.
Yeah.
Like there are different parts of the state that sound different. I mean, it's wild. But then they'll just pick some random accent, switch back and forth between several. I'm like, oh, you're Cajun now. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Like just don't try it if you can't do it. That's all I ask. Like you're not like likelier to win especially like an Avatar. That man could have been from wherever. This is like in a future land. You don't need to make the Australian man who's handsome and he's not hired because of his acting ability primarily. Okay. You don't need to make that man have an accent. It upset me. I was like, I'm not listening to 3 hours of this.
Yeah.
This is awful.
So to sum up, we're optimistic about the new era of the Panthers.